Welcome. So we're going to answer these questions before us. It tells us that sine of theta is equal to 0.3 and cos of x is equal to 0.6. And we need to use our symmetry properties to answer these questions. The first one's really quite easy. It's telling us that sine of 2 pi plus theta. So we have to recognize which quadrant we're in by looking at these angles here. Well, if it's 2 pi plus theta, I know that I can just ignore this 2 pi here. It's just taking me back to that very first quadrant because 2 pi is just a full rotation. So therefore, I can answer this as simply sine of theta, and I know that sine of theta is 0.3, so no fuss there. Now, the next one is really quite tricky. These are the tricky complementary identities. This is the way I like to think about them. You may have been taught a different way, but this is just the way I kind of visualize it. I think first, okay, as soon as I have 3 pi on 2 or pi on 2 or really anything with pi on 2 with an odd number here, I know that my sine or my cos are going to switch over. So the cos now is going to become a sine. And I know that simply because I can see this, and I know that causes a switch. Okay. Then you have to ask yourself, am I positive or negative here? This is where you might like to draw yourself a little unit circle. You can think about where 3 pi on 2 is. And if I'm going back theta, that means I'm going to be in my third quadrant. Now, in my third quadrant, is cos positive or negative? It is negative, so that means it's negative sine on theta. So this right here, cos of 3 pi on 2 minus theta, is equal to or equivalent to this right here. And because I know that sine of theta, this right here, is 0.3, my answer is just negative 0.3, just like that. So nothing too crazy there. We now move on to our next one here, and we're going to use that same logic once again. So see how I have pi on 2 plus an angle. Well, as soon as I see that, so remember, it's an odd number over 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my cos this time to a sine. And this is going to become sine of theta. Then we think about which quadrant we're in. Now, here is pi on 2 up here. So if I plus theta, I'm over here. I'm in my second quadrant. Cos is negative in my second quadrant. So that means I'm going to be left with negative 0.3 again. And we continue now. We come to this one. Same logic again. We've got a whole bunch of complementary identities here. This time I've got cos, so that means I'm going to change it to, this time I've got sine, so I change it to cos, and it's going to be cos of x. We think about which quadrant we're in. 3 pi on 2 is here. I'm going back an angle. I'm in my third quadrant. And in my third quadrant, I know that sine is negative, so it's going to be negative cos of x. So that means here I'm going to get negative. Now, what was cos of x? Cos of x was 0.6. Then we continue on. Then we go to this one right here. So we've got cos of 2 pi minus x. So these are our supplementary relationships. So we've got 360 degrees minus an angle, which is taking us to our fourth quadrant. And I know that in my fourth quadrant, cos is positive. So it's just going to be cos of x. And cos of x is 0.6. And then our last but not least, when we have a negative angle with a sine, we can just take that negative out to the front. And that means I'm going to be left with negative 0.3, just like that. So those are all our answers. We're using our symmetry properties to arrive at the correct answers there. And it's just important you know how these operate and feel comfortable with doing so. If anything in this video didn't make any sense, make sure you reach out to your teachers for clarification. But hopefully all that made sense. And of course, there are different ways of going about this. So if you learned a different way, but you can get the right answer, that's all that matters. I'll see you in the next one.